welcome to Her Business, where we interview inspiring businesswomen and entrepreneurs. I'm Suzi Dafnis of the Australian Businesswomen's Network. My guest today is Lisa Murray, author of The MOJO of Flow, and in this interview we take a look at how we sometimes sabotage flow in our own lives, how to superpower the way that life flows for you, and some tips for getting others to willingly support us to get our goals. Enjoy this interview with Lisa Murray. Lisa, hi and welcome to Her Business.
Hi Suzi, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining us to talk about The MOJO of Flow, your brand new book. Tell us, what does the title mean? What is The MOJO of Flow?
Okay, well, we all know that concept of flow when we're really in the moment, when we're really engaged in what we're doing, when it's really sort of all productive and all going, along really well. And what I really looked at when I started writing this book was that actually I think you can have that in a much broader way in your life and in your business. And so I've got a whole lot of tools that actually allow you to come into that flow state in a much bigger way than just, in that moment on that particular project. And when you add the mojo side to that, Austin Powers, he was all about the sort of the sexualness, but really there's so much more to it. It's your mojo is that time when everything is just really working well for you, when you're on a bit of a roll and everything's just showing up how it needs to, and you're not really trying very hard. And so I really wanted people to understand that, life and business can be a lot easier than what we like to think it is. And so this book is just full of tools that actually sort of connect all those bits together and actually show people how to move into that space and have it happen a lot more often in their life.
One of the things that I'm sure those listening can relate to is that life doesn't always flow. But what are we doing to sabotage that flow in our lives?
Yeah, look, Suzi, for all of us, there's moments of that. And I think, for this year, lots of people have had those moments. And we do sabotage ourselves because, if we're oversensitive or a perfectionist or we're an overachiever, we end up in these sort of behavioral patterns that actually we don't even see as patterns. We actually just think that's who we are, but actually they're patterns that we can change. And so for an overachiever, for example, that whole thing of having to be a perfectionist and having to be the best and having to do everything and not having other people contribute, for example, actually really creates a limited flow. Whereas if we're willing, as an overachiever, to actually sort of draw in all the energy and the resources of the people around us, so much more can happen. And so that's one example. With an oversensitive person or an overwhelmed person, and lots of people, overwhelm is the thing that's their biggest sabotage, because they just look at it all and they go, oh, there's so many possibilities here, I'll just do none of them because it's all too hard to work out which one to do. So, and oversensitive people are particularly prone to that because they just find the stimulation too much. So some of that is about confidence. Some of that is just about actually knowing how to manage your energy. And it's really, there's hundreds of ways we sabotage ourselves. And it's really actually having awareness of what's going on that's the first step to coming out of that.
When we look at the areas of burnout and overwhelm, which, regardless whether you work for someone else or you work for yourself, we do sometimes find ourselves. What are the greatest causes of these two phenomena?
I think ultimately for me, it all comes back to one thing: people not being aware of the trigger points that are going to send them into those spaces. Mm-hmm. There's actually like 1,000 tiny little signals that come before the time when you're actually burnt out or overwhelmed. And of course, we're so busy and so frantically getting things done that we don't think about those tiny little signals. And one of the really important things is to actually look at that and go, okay, these are some of the trigger points for me. Like, I'm really aware that if I spend too much time in really loud environments, that is just not going to work for me on multiple levels. And I'm really aware that if I have too many deadlines too close together, that doesn't work either. And so I look at all the possibilities, and I actually, if that little quiet voice, that little twingy thing that we have where we go, oh, that was the blip when I knew that wasn't going to work. But we forge on because we think that I'm tough, I can do it. Actually, no. It's much better to go, right, what's that blip really mean? What is that thing that's happening there? And if I did something different, what else could happen?
What about we now look at how to superpower our flow? I love that term that you have there in your book. And look at some of the foundations of flow before we look at what are all those steps to moving towards that. So what are the foundations to start with?
Okay, look, the thing that I tell pretty much every client that ever comes to see me is self-care. If you don't give yourself an hour a day, and ideally an hour a day a week as well, of nurturing and care for you, then the chances of flow showing up in a really easy way for you are kind of getting smaller and smaller and smaller, because that self-care is the thing that actually allows you to fill up the well so that you can keep drawing from it. And, we all know people who just never look after themselves. And, I've been that person for a lot of my life. And I was very resistant to looking after myself because I have things to do, But obviously that isn't really, ultimately you can get a lot more done if you really look after yourself. So, yeah, self-care is a big thing.
Well, with self-care, I mean, that can be very individual. What self-care for you may not be for me. Would that be right?
Yes. So one of the things when I had my burnout that someone said to me to do was to make a list of like 50 things for self-care. And I got to about number 5 and I'm like, what's she talking about? Because I didn't have a very good repertoire of what that actually looked like. And it took me quite a lot of investigation and work to realize that, I could have a list, and now, I could easily tell you 100. And it is also about, yes, it is what works for you, because, I like walking, but there's people who love running. And yeah, so you've got to choose what works for you. It's a very individual thing and really important to actually create that space, because with the space comes all the magic.
So with the foundations of flow, anything else other than self-care that we should be considering?
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing, I think, what your trigger points are, and we talked about that a little bit before, but once you know those trigger points, I also have then a whole series of either circuit breakers, which are things that actually just go, okay, right, complete change of direction, or things that allow me to manage that, so that if I do want to go to an event that's really noisy and intense, I actually have a whole lot of ways of managing that mean it's very easy for me to be able to choose what I want to do and to have that flow in my way without having to meet everybody else's expectations.
If we want to supercharge, superpower our flow, get really in the flow, what are some of the things we can look at, in addition to what we've already spoken about?
Yep, sure. One of my favourite things is asking questions, and not your normal sort of questions. I ask a lot of questions that actually don't necessarily have an obvious answer, and in fact, I don't even go looking for the answer. And what this does, it actually allows, I guess, the awareness of what's possible to come through for you. It actually taps you into your intuition in a really good way. So, for example, I might have a list of, say, 25 projects at any one time, and that would be pretty common for me. And with that, I would then be looking to use my time in a way that is most valuable for the flow. So a really simple way to do that is to really be in the moment and just keep looking at your list and going, well, what's next? And it's really such a simple thing, but there's always going to be something that's going to pop out at you, and something that will say, yes, yes, pick me, pick me. And I find that in doing that, somehow there's this natural progression of events that happens. And I was talking to you earlier about, even all the publicity for this book, it's just sort of falling out of the sky in really easy ways for me, because I'm really willing to go, what's next? And to go and meet the next person or talk to somebody, or, whatever it may be. And I'm also, so that's a really good question, what's next? Also, when you're in a stuck place, because often one of the things with flow is we get to this stuck place and we're like, well, how do we undo that? And I would just be asking, well, what are the possibilities of seeing this situation really differently, and actually sort of turning it inside out and twisting it upside down, and having a look at all the different ways that you could look at the situation. And in doing that, and in actually not assuming I have a right answer for it, because, one of the really funny things is that we all think we know the answer to how this is all going to work for our project. And sometimes when I go, okay, that's it, I don't know anything, I have no idea about any of it, what else is possible here, things just show up. And that might be going, who could help me with this? And sometimes I'll just ring someone, I'll say, look, I've got this idea about this and it's not working for me at the moment, have you got any ideas? And someone will just go, oh yeah, it's this, or why don't we play with that? Or they'll put some little blip of information in there that just makes the whole thing change.
I want to ask you in just a couple of minutes about the role that others can play in helping us have more flow. What else can we do? We're asking questions. What else can we do to superpower our flow?
Okay, change your environment. There's a couple of things with that. Now, I actually, I have an environment set up for my work that really works for me well, but I also know that sitting in the one place all day, every day really doesn't work. So I spend a lot of time doing creative things, because that, even though it looks on the surface really unrelated to what I might be working on, it always brings me through new insights, new ideas, new things. So creativity, because it actually taps into the right side of your brain. That works really well. Also, just actually, like, some days I'll go, right, I've had enough. This isn't working. I'm going to go to the beach. And I simply just go and do something completely different. Because in doing that, it's like everything can recalibrate inside your brain, and it just makes things so much more easy in lots of ways.
I want to ask you about the role that others can play in our flow, and there is a section of the book that deals with connecting and disconnecting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so we're in this really hyper-connected world, and there's huge benefits to that. All the social media and all those different things, there's so much benefit to people in business in how that actually works. So connecting is really, really important, because I'm really willing to know that I don't know everything, that I haven't seen all the possibilities, and that there's other people that I know do. Someone once said to me that the answer to everything you actually ever want to need to know is within 20 kilometers of you. And now that we're online, that's even more so is the view of it. So it's always about, asking people. And I will talk about my projects in a very general way to allow people to contribute, because we're often maybe not so willing to receive, because we think we know things and we think we're going to have to do it all by ourselves. But when we're actually willing to receive contributions from other people, like this book's been a really interesting point from, so many of the topics that I've covered in here have come from conversations on social media.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I'll start a conversation about something, and then when people put it out, I go, oh, right, so they have trouble with that, because that's maybe not something that is a bother for me. It's easy for me. And so I go, oh, that bit needs to be in the book, and I can be really clear about that. So those connections, I think, besides what they give to us as people and, in terms of the essence of who we are, they're very important for adding to what you're doing and for making that be much easier.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as the disconnecting goes, because we're so hyper-connected, if you don't actually completely disconnect and, go and do something that you love that's nothing to do with being online, that, sometimes there's even nothing to do with other people, when you do that disconnection, it actually creates the space for you to sort of reorder all of that stimulation and all of that information that's been coming in its flow, and actually going, well, which bits are valuable here and which bits aren't? Because it's very easy to go, oh, I've just got 100 projects, and which one will I choose, and to sit there and do none of them. So the disconnection is actually the bit that allows you to get that sense of what's actually important and what's going to be the most value.
I just want to check in on this point, because I don't think you're harping on the message about, well, just turn off the BlackBerry, or as in, it's more the case, the iPhone. That's not what you mean.
No, I mean, it's much more than that. It's actually taking away all of the stimulation that keeps your brain so strongly engaged that all you can see is your list of projects. And it actually is really going, okay, so it's really cool that I've got all that stuff over there, but if I go over here and I really disconnect and I just have some chill out time of whatever that might be for you, and a week or two is better. Most of us would never get a week without connection with all of the people and the things around us. And I think that when you take that space and you actually go, this is space and time for me, and I don't need to be connected, I'm not missing out on anything, because we all think we're going to miss out, then that actually creates a different energy in your business, in your life, that allows you to see what you truly want. And that's when the flow shows up.
And that space, of course, can't happen unless you make space for it.
Yeah, pretty much. You need to make space for the space. That's it, in a nutshell.
Now, one of the things that you're doing, obviously, because you've got this great new book, is you are being more visible. You're, adding to your profile. You're putting yourself out in the market. How does, for those of us listening, how does being more visible help with flow?
All right. I think the most important thing for me is firstly, it's a marketplace for testing my ideas, okay? Because I know what works on me, I know what works on my clients, but I also want to be sure that that actually goes across a much broader audience. And so that visibility actually allows me to test out ideas. And also for new ideas that I come up with, I can test them pretty early and pretty quickly. I don't have to wait for the right client to come along, So that's really excellent to actually just get that feedback and that interaction. I think also, like I don't believe that businesses should be hard. I don't believe you should have to. Okay, yes, I do a lot of work, but I don't find it hard work. I don't wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, I've got so much work to do. Because I am visible, people come to me with ideas, people come to me with projects, people come to me with opportunities for promoting things. I don't, and that's not to say I don't strategically go looking for things at times, I do, but that visibility then, if I do that, also allows me to have a much easier way to get a foot in the door. So there's really a benefit. Like I actually had coffee with a guy who I met via Facebook through another connection today, and he said to me, well, you're really famous. And I was just laughing. I'm like, I don't think of myself as famous at all. I think I've got such a long way to go. But it was really that thing of he was really willing to meet with me because he perceived me as that, So it opens doors for you is what I would say to you. You still need your content. You still need to have something that people want, but it does definitely open doors. And it also allows people to connect you up with other relevant people. Like I have lots of people who go, oh, you really need to talk to such and such because they know this about this. And I go, oh, yeah, that's a little bit of my puzzle I was missing. Thank you.
Congratulations on the book. We look forward to seeing it. We're talking to you just a couple of weeks before it's released, so our very best. Thank you so much for joining us on Her Business.
Thanks, Susie. My pleasure. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Lisa Murray, author of The MOJO of Flow. Learn more about the book at www.revivecoaching.com.au/mojo. I'm Suzi Dafnis of the Australian Business Women's Network, a national training and mentoring organisation for businesswomen. If you're ready to be connected to inspiring women who are making a difference to the business landscape, ask us today about our membership programs. And for more interviews with inspiring businesswomen, visit our website at www.abn.org.au.